I sometimes receive this kind of a comment. People say things like, I eat wheat and it doesn't bother me. Or I went to Paris and I had a croissant and I had no ill effect. Or I went to Italy and had some Italian bread and I experienced no adverse effects. Well, does something have to reach consciousness with a perceived effect for it to be harmful? No, of course not. Can you smoke cigarettes for 10 years, develop lung disease and heart disease, but not be aware of it? Absolutely, that's the rule, in fact. Can you drink rice milk filled with arsenic or feed it to a child, and it has long-term chronic arsenic toxicity? Yes. So you don't have to experience an adverse effect, a perceived adverse effect for something to have ill effects on your health long-term. So what could happen if you ate, say, a bagel, a sandwich, pasta, anything made with modern wheat? Of course, recall that modern wheat is the creation of genetics research, high-yield semi-dwarf wheat. If you happen to drive through places like Iowa or Ohio, look for very short fields about 12 inches tall. That is now what is being called wheat. It's very different. All wheat, ancestral wheat, wild wheat, all forms are toxic. But the modern form, that is high-yield semi-dwarf wheat, is the most toxic of all. Not on purpose. They didn't do it on purpose. They did it to support agricultural interests like yield per acre or resistance to pests. And so if you don't feel anything bad when you consume something made of wheat, what does it mean? What else is going on beneath the surface that you may not be aware of? Well, the carbohydrate unique to wheat and other grains is called Amylopectin A, meaning it's a carbohydrate with a unique branching structure that makes it very susceptible to rapid digestion by the enzyme amylase. That's a digestive enzyme in your saliva, also in your stomach, and it's responsible for very rapid breakdown of that amylopectin A into sugars. And so amylopectin A raises blood glucose to very high levels. High blood glucose leads to protein glycation. That is, proteins modified by glucose, an irreversible reaction. So you can glycate hemoglobin, and that's what hemoglobin A1C is, glycated hemoglobin. You glycate collagen in your skin, in your joints, and elsewhere. Collagen is very prone to glycation. And when you glycate, say, the collagen in your skin, it accelerates collagen breakdown, thinning of the dermal layer of skin, development of wrinkles. And so the amylopectin A accelerates skin aging and thinning. Collagen in your joints, such as knees and hips, is also very prone to glycation. And as it becomes glycated, it becomes brittle, breaks down over time, fragments, and then over time leads to bone-on-bone arthritis. So that bagel or sandwich or whatever that caused the high blood glucose accelerates the breakdown of your joints. But it may take 20, 30 years for you to have severe arthritis sufficient to use a walker, have your joints replaced, whatever. So just because you didn't experience anything with that consumption, that moment, doesn't mean you're not developing issues long term. So that's the amylopectin A. The amylopectin A, I should also mention, is the trigger for the liver's process called de novo lipogenesis, conversion of carbohydrates, amylopectin A, to triglycerides, fats. De novo lipogenesis, creating new fats. And those triglycerides both are released into the bloodstream packaged as VLDL, or very low density lipoproteins, that cause heart disease and trigger the formation of small LDL particles, the real cause of heart disease, not LDL cholesterol. And some of those triglycerides caused by liver de novo lipogenesis from consumption of amylopectin A from grains also can stay put in the liver. That's the process that leads to fatty liver. So amylopectin A, the carbohydrate unique to wheat and grains, lots of adverse effects that you may not be aware of. How about wheat germ agglutinin? That's the lectin protein. Lots of plants have this protective protein called lectin because it provides pest resistance, fungal resistance, and modern wheat has been cultivated for greater quantities of wheat germ agglutinin because farmers like the way it helps resist pests and fungal infestations or molds. And so modern wheat is enriched in wheat germ agglutinin. What's wrong with that? Wheat germ agglutinin is a very potent bowel toxin. If we purified 1 milligram, just a speck, of wheat germ agglutinin and gave it to an animal, like a laboratory rat, it denudes or kills off all the digestive villi, that is the hair-like projections line the intestines that helps you absorb nutrients. So wheat germ agglutinin is very toxic and denudes or damages the villi of the intestinal tract. It also increases intestinal permeability, or gut leak, people say, and that increases risk for many other health conditions. How about phytates? Phytates are compounds that bind minerals in your gut, mostly calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc, making them unavailable for absorption. This is a real problem in children, for instance, because zinc, for instance, is required for neurological maturation. If a child eats something made of wheat, whether it's crackers or pasta or other food, it binds the zinc and other positively charged minerals. That child passes those minerals out into the toilet because those minerals are unavailable for absorption. There's a problem in females, especially because it blocks absorption of iron. So iron deficiency anemia is very common in people who consume wheat products. But you won't be aware of it overtly. There's no symptoms associated with that. So severe deficiency over time can lead to overt symptoms, but in the early months to years, you won't feel the thing. How about the gliadin protein? That's the protein within gluten that's responsible for most of the adverse effects of gluten. Well, gliadin is a protein that initiates increased intestinal permeability, and we now know with confidence that gliadin also is the initiator of the autoimmune process, at least in rheumatoid arthritis and type 1 diabetes, probably a long list of other autoimmune conditions, but the full exploration has not been done. But the mechanism identified in which gliadin increases intestinal permeability and causes cross-reactivity against human proteins is the likely cause for many, if not most, autoimmune conditions. The gliadin protein also, you may recall, is not fully digestible by humans. We don't have the digestive enzymes that allow us to break the gliadin protein down into single amino acids, like we would say the proteins from eggs or a piece of beef. So the gliadin protein, we lack digestive enzymes for full digestion. Instead, we break it down into 4 or 5 amino acid long peptide fragments. These fragments are able to cross into the brain and bind to opioid receptors, where they trigger appetite. You might not be aware of it, but your appetite has been amplified by these gliadin-derived opioid peptides. They act as opioids in the brain. And so that's a brief list of some of the effects you may not be aware of when you consume that food made of wheat that didn't make you feel sick, but are doing all kinds of things beneath the surface.